Hey, it's Len Testa, host of the Disney Dish. A quick note to say that there are 3 special live Disney Dish shows over at disneydish.bandcamp.com. These are stereo recordings of me and Jim walking through the Magic Kingdom, Epcot, the studios, and soon the Animal Kingdom, talking about what's happening in the parks and what's coming up. These shows are exclusive to Bandcamp, so you won't find them on your iTunes or Stitcher feeds. So head over to disneydish.bandcamp.com to listen. As for this episode, it's our first for March 2015, and it's the second half of our conversation about the history of the Grand Floridian Resort. Lots of really interesting stuff here, including how Pleasure Island, Henry Flagler, and railroads all combined to get the resort built. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to another edition of the Unofficial Guide at Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. It is our first April show of the year, and today we're finishing up a story that we started earlier about the Grand Floridian Resort, its history, and its possible future. In order to tell that story is, of course, Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
Not bad. Yourself, Len?
I am doing well, thank you.
Okay. Well, if we wanted this to be a really short show, which every so often we entertain the idea of.
And we're done.
Yeah, there we go. We could just go with the Imagineers version of why there is a Grand Floridian Hotel, which actually, to hear them talk is part of the mythology of Pleasure Island.
Really? There's the Grand Floridian is linked to. Okay, I've never heard this story. Go ahead.
Okay, so if you understand, the mythology they created for the island, in 1898 we had Pittsburgh steel magnate Meriwether Adam Pleasure. He meets opera singer Isabella Dominique, and after a whirlwind 3-week-long courtship, they marry. So then jump ahead to 1911. Pleasure purchases the Furdiber Peninsula, which eventually becomes known as Pleasure Island, along with the Empress Lily showboat. And at great expense, he has the showboat hauled over land. Then he and his bride, along with their growing family, travel up the St. John Aquifer and drop anchor at the end of the peninsula. The very next year, he founds the Pleasure Canvas and Sailmaking operation, immediately a huge success. And by 1918, the Pleasure family has outgrown their showboat home. And so Meriwether has the Pleasure family home.
Hold on, I got to stop you here. Have you been drinking? Because I've never heard of any of this. This is crazy.
This is the real fake mythology.
No, really?
Yes, in fact, I have to credit Disney historian Jim Korkis. He's the guy who actually chased this down. The poor slob walked around the island. You may recall that on the island there were all of these little black plaques that sort of, delineated the history of the island.
Yeah.
Jim went around and collected all of this info and finally pulled the chronology together. So a big shout out to Mr. Korkis for doing this. But anyway.
How much alcohol was consumed during these concept meetings?
Oh, dear Lord. Again, the Betty Ford Center at that point was maintaining a shuttle that actually went straight.
It's every hour
from 1401 Flower Street right to the lobby. Just take them in, boys.
All right. So they outgrow It's like the Partridge Family outgrowing the bus. All right, go ahead.
That's right. Okay, so he has the Pleasure family home, which is this Bermuda-style mansion built overlooking Lake Buena Vista. That building is now known as the Portobello Yacht Club. And actually the reason the restaurant serves Italian food is Isabella's Italian heritage. Anyway, final piece of the puzzle, all right? As a wedding gift to Isabella in 1937, and mostly to get away from the boys who were doing crazy things at this point, Meriwether Adam Pleasure builds a new home, which eventually becomes known as the Grand Floridian Beach Resort. And again, yeah, now you have to understand the island opens up in 89, the hotel opens up in 88. So, this was one of these things where it's like, okay, let's connect everything.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's a fun idea,
It is. I give them credit. That's a comprehensive story.
Okay, but to be, I told that story for a reason, because in a weird sort of way, this faux mythology really reflects the man who actually inspired the creation of the Grand Floridian Beach Resort, and that's Henry Flagler.
Right.
All right. Henry Flagler, for those of you who don't know, was an American industrialist. He was one of the founders of Standard Oil, but more importantly for the story we're telling today, he's the guy who really drove the development of the Atlantic coast of Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and in a lot of circles, he's known as the father of both Miami and Palm Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of an interesting story. I mean, again, just weird echoes of the faux mythology that the Imagineers set up for Meriwether. So it's 1879. Flagler has his first wife, Mary, has some serious health problems. So, an advice of physician, he takes her down to Jacksonville for the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Mary dies in 1881. But in the grand tradition of American millionaires, that Henry then marries the woman who was the caregiver for his ailing bride, Mary.
Right.
A woman called Ida Alice. And for their wedding, they traveled to St. Augustine. And Flagler finds the city charming, but it's just no real decent hotel. And, and at the same thing, transportation is miserable. Mm-hmm. So, he meets up with a gentleman there in town, a Franklin Smith, who's just built the town's first attempt at a halfway decent hotel, the Villa Zoraida. And Flagler offers to buy it for his honeymoon. It's like, get all these other people out of here. Smith wouldn't sell, but that sort of, planted the seed for the idea of what Flagler eventually decided to do in St. Augustine.
Yeah.
So while he's still on the board of Standard Oil, he decides, I've seen the potential of Florida. So he goes down in 1885 and builds the 540-room Ponce de Leon Hotel, which again, in the kind of the tradition of what happened with Disney, where it was, Disney World was supposed to be built for $100 million, wound up costing $400 million. That this hotel goes way over budget. But again, Henry's got Standard Oil money, so don't worry about it.
We'll just raise the price of oil. It's fine.
And then, of course, he needs a way to bring people to his hotel. So he actually purchases a bunch of short line railroads. Yep. And sets up the Florida East Coast Railroad system.
He brings the railroad to Florida, yes.
Now, if you want to see this hotel, the Ponce de Leon, the thing that he built, it's actually now Flagler College.
I was going to say, it's Flagler College.
So, and again, so now Henry's gotten his first taste of, construction and doing, again, he's got the exact same disease that Walt's got. It's like, this is cool. So I'm going to found the American Riviera. He builds a railroad bridge across the St. Johns River, so now he can start moving guests over to Daytona, or an area just north of Daytona, which is where he builds the Hotel Armand. Also builds the Alcazar Hotel as an overflow for the Ponce de Leon. Going forward from there, he eventually builds the 1100 Royal Poinciana Hotel, and now is extending his railroad line to Palm Beach and West Palm Beach, and he thinks he's, at this point, he's pretty much set. It's like, okay, this is going to be the terminus of my rail system, that West Palm Beach. But in both 1894 and 1895, they had, in a weird parallel to the winter we just had, they had this really hard, severe freeze hit the area. And so he decides, all right, I got to push further south. He purchases more railroad equipment. He purchases more land. He winds up 60 miles to the south in a town known as Miami. Which had been
in 90 more miles. He's in Cuba. What the heck? What stopped him? I don't understand.
Oh, I don't think Teddy Roosevelt was quite on board at that point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reason he stopped in Miami is this the one part of Florida where the freeze hadn't reached. So again, let's build grand hotels here and, that sort of thing. I mean, so just to back up. So obviously these sorts of grand hotels are a part of Florida's history. But, as we mentioned in the last podcast, when Disney was originally laying out the land for Walt Disney World, they had envisioned along Seven Seas Lagoon this this 40-acre parcel of land, on the northwestern shore was going to be where they're going to build the Asian resort. It was a Thai-themed hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you've seen any of the literature from pre-opening for Disney World, this was always listed as something that was coming soon. And again, what just got kind of interesting is that when the resort opens in 71, within that first decade, clearly there'd been some rethinking on, do we want to do the Thai? And I know on our last show about this, we talked, how the oil embargo and that sort of thing impacted it. But I think what's interesting is why they stepped away creatively from the Thai and again, developed the Grand Floridian, which, just to be clear here, predated Michael Eisner. I mean, we talked the last show about Dick Nunes doing an interview in May of 1982 for Disney's Eyes and Ear, the cast member newsletter. And just ahead of the opening of Epcot, he was talking about how they were thinking with the success of the second gate that they were going to really have to increase the number of hotels they had on property. And the Grand Floridian, he talked openly as this interview about the Grand Floridian. It will be a replica of a great Florida hotel of the 1900s, and our creative people have come up with a great design. But again, the thing I love about this plan is, again, it's classic Disney, that in that they come up with an idea that they talk about, but they don't move on for decades. I mean, to hear Dick talk, the real exciting part of the Grand Floridian wasn't necessarily a hotel celebrating the history of Florida, but the fact that they were going to be able to build these 16 secluded cottages on Beachcomber Isle, which was just going to be just off of the Grand Floridian beach.
Okay. The
island would be connected to the Grand Floridian by a boardwalk, and you and I both know that
there's an island there.
Well, more to the point, it's just like, this is just what they did with that right now, we're weeks out from the Bora Bora DVC units, which are honeymoon cottages out on the water.
They should be a couple days out, yeah.
Yeah, connected by a boardwalk. I mean, so it's like what you say in 1982 finally gets constructed and open to the public in 2015. No idea actually dies at Walt Disney World. It just waits for somebody to go, wait a minute, put it over there.
Exactly. So did anyone ever comment on Disney? Did anyone ever comment on the record about the similarities in the architecture design between the Grand Floridian and what is it, the Hotel Coronado? They kind of look.
No, they. In fact, it's interesting you bring that up because I don't know if you remember the original Westcott, plans when they were going to turn the parking lot of Walt Disney World into a theme park and drop 3 different hotels in.
Walt Disney World or Disneyland?
Disneyland, excuse me, in Anaheim. And so among one of the hotels they were going to do, they were going to pay tribute to all of California's architecture, was a pretty, dead-on copy of the Coronado.
And the Coronado was like,
Well, what they did was, the day after this announcement, they went out and bought a Mickey Mouse inflatable and stuck it on the lawn of the hotel after painting it white so you couldn't see that it was Mickey. Mm-hmm. But they put a big sign on the inflatable that said, Copy Mouse. Just the effect of,
hey.
I mean, what is it? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and Disney, we're flattered enough at this point. You can stop,
Plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery.
There we go. But as it turns out, if you actually drill down into the flow, it's kind of a Frankenstein monster in that individual pieces and design elements have been plucked from grand resorts and hotels all over the United States. For example, the solid white exterior, giving a shout out to my home state of New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. That was modeled after the Mount Washington Resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. As for the hotel's sprawling layout, with the 5 outer lodge buildings, the Sago Cay, the Sugarloaf, the Conch Key, the Boca Chica, and the Big Pine Key. Those are all named after islands in the Florida Keys. Not to mention the red roofs and the turrets. You're right, Len. That comes straight from the Hotel del Coronado. But at the same time, what's kind of interesting is that the lobby of the hotel is actually, the 5-story, sort of open lobby.
Mm-hmm.
That's pulled straight from the Brown Hotel in Denver.
Really?
So, yeah, they went all around the country, grabbing individual pieces of this thing. Anyway,
so they've stolen from the best. It's sort of like
that's it exactly.
Eclectic stealing.
That's what I love about Disney is the rest of us were perfectly happy with towels and ashtrays, but Disney steals whole chunks of hotels and, just puts them together and makes their new resorts. All right. The other thing that's worth noting here is, again, remember the original piece of property that this was built on, this sort of 40 acres that jutted out into Seven Seas Lagoon. The original plan, given its location, was to build a hotel that was tied to the theme park land that was, physically closest to this hotel, which was Adventureland. But what do you imagine? Yeah. I mean, in fact, the notion was that, and I guess this actually worked during the early days of Disney's Magic Kingdom, before all the trees grew back up after the first phase of construction. That, for example, you could stand in Tomorrowland and look out of the park and see the Contemporary. So it's like that extends that story in that direction. Likewise, if you were standing in Adventureland, you could see through the trees the Polynesian in the distance. And the thinking was that the tie would be close enough that you really could see, the tall A-frame building sort of sticking up from the jungle. And the notion was that somewhere off through the jungle, there's another kingdom worth exploring. And,
wow.
So
I wonder if you could see it from the top of, Swiss Family Treehouse.
That's an interesting question. We'll have to check that out the next time we're in the park.
Okay.
But in the case of the flow, Disney realized that, if we're going to want to create some connective tissue, we're going to have to make some changes. And so, what they did is they actually sort of shaved off land from one side of it and moved it over to part of the harbor. So in essence, they reorientated the construction site. So it really faced more toward, Main Street USA. And, so guests staying there could look out across the water at that 19th century Eastern Seaboard resort town design and feel like, okay, I'm staying in something that's, of that period, and there's that, over there. And again, you just
ignoring the monorail that's going past.
Yeah, sure. I know.
And the Contemporary behind you, but all right, okay. You have to bring the story together. I get it. Close enough. Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, it's funny you mentioned the monorail because that's what's kind of intriguing. They deliberately built a Victorian-era train station for the monorail to come into. So, the notion of obviously it's a disconnect to have this supposedly modern transportation system roll up outside of this faux, turn-of-the-century hotel, but it's just sort of like, it's inside that building. It's the buildings of the Victorian era. We're doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Now, it's interesting noting here that architect Charles Henning, who worked for Wibberley, Allison, Tong and Goo, that's seriously, that's the name of the architectural firm. They're the ones who worked off of the Disney Development Company's version of the plans. They had actually reworked the plans that had been designed in the early 1980s during Dick Nunes's time. He described the Grand Floridian as the first real Disney hotel. And just to be clear here, the reason he said that, he thinks of, or thought of the Grand Floridian as kind of an American castle.
Really?
Yeah, and in much the same way as Cinderella Castle is a fairy tale castle. But, just the notion that, somebody, in that kind of Charles Foster Kane, way that he, that because of people like Flagler, these grand buildings got built and, people, again, in weird parallels to what Walt did in 71, at the turn of the century, people would get on trains and travel down the eastern seaboard to stay in these, faux Spanish buildings or, that sort of thing to get away and have a little fun and fantasy and enjoy the warmth of Florida.
Wow.
All right. Anyway, okay. So it's 1985, less than a year after Michael Eisner and company have come on board as Disney's new management team. They decide they're going to go ahead with construction of this 900-room resort. The original budget for the project was $100 million. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, Len. Construction begins in May of 1986 and was supposed to take 18 months to complete.
A lot of building for 18 months.
Yeah, but they did manage to get it framed, this whole 750,000 square foot resort by July of 1987, with the original 6 5-story buildings that were built on site being constructed by Rooney Enterprises of Orlando and Fort Lauderdale. And according to the folks at Rooney, at the height of construction, they had over 500 people on site getting this hotel built.
Wow.
Now, again, I'm going to put these numbers out here not to make people feel bad because of inflation or whatever, but by April of 1988, Walt Disney World was accepting reservations for its new top-of-the-line hotel. The rooms, as they were originally offered, went for $165 to $285 a night.
This is back when a steak was a nickel, though, so it's completely different, Joe.
There you go. And the highest price, the $285, Len?
Yeah.
That was for the honeymoon suite.
I think now, was it start like 6? In the 6s?
Yeah.
But, I mean, a standard room during holiday season can easily run you, $1,200-$1,300.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, again, people want to stay there for the opulence. I mean, for that turn of the century feel. Now, mind you, that did come at a cost. I mean, for example, of the 1,075 people that they hired to work at the resort, and then they had 3+ weeks of training before they opened to the public. The maids were like, "What do you mean I can't push a cart from room to room?" It's like, nope, you have to carry everything with you in a wicker basket.
That's not gonna happen.
Not only that, but they had to wear gay 90s themed costumes while they were hauling these wicker baskets. But yeah, from the moment the place opened with its polished brass banister on that grand staircase, or the rosewood keys on the antique piano, at the center of this 5,800 square foot lobby. Every detail of this now $135 million hotel. It's like, yep. It just, as you expected, Len, by more than a third, they, it's like, oh, that costs how much? But that's the weirdest part of it is that, if you really get right down to it, at the Grand Floridian, real wood, real marble, that sort of thing, that stuff is only used where the guest can touch it. Anything that's out of reach is synthetic. For example, of the 120 miles of scrolling and turned post and curved moldings that you see throughout this Victorian architecture, a large portion of that stuff isn't really wood. It's either fiberglass or molded plastic. But yeah, the hotel opens, in June of that year with Michael Eisner and Burt Reynolds, if you can believe it. Standing there, again, June 25th, 1988, in the hot Florida sun in front of 1,500 travel agents, they throw open the place. And it's a hit right off of the bat. And in fact, doubling back on what we had said earlier about this being, the first true Disney hotel really being an American castle. Mm-hmm. So who comes to stay at our American castle in August of 1993, but real royalty, that with Princess Diana and her sons.
Really, they stayed there.
Yeah, William and Henry, and in fact, who was kind of interesting because, the paparazzi, the English paparazzi were, had expected, well, this will be easy. And it's like, no, Disney
yeah.
kept sneaking the family out through the kitchens or that sort of thing. But, a couple of lucky photographers did get shots of, the family, on Splash Mountain. But it was this, in a weird sort of way, it was the thing that did put the hotel on the map. Because again, when royalty stays there, that it must be this wondrous, wondrous thing.
Right.
So, now we jump ahead to Disney deciding, well, okay, we have this amazing facility. What can we do, to further expand the property? And this is where the idea, Disney had started its fairy tale weddings division, I want to say in 91. But, and it proven to be this great, new revenue source for the resort, but they kept having to stage weddings in convention centers and, around property. And it just, there was a feeling that they could do better. And there was this chunk of property right next door to the Grand Floridian. So they decided to build, this pavilion, which could serve up to, seat up to 300 people and could do upwards of 6 ceremonies per day.
Oh yeah.
Now,
have you ever sat out in front of it and just watched?
Not really.
It's like a marriage factory, man.
Well, I did get to talk with a cast member who worked at this place, and he had some amazing stories of how they do 6 ceremonies a day, and it just as one family is headed out, another bride is rolling up in Cinderella's carousel with those 6 little horses who are working like Trojans all day, hauling brides.
It's true.
Now, you actually have personal experience, right? You were telling me your brother got married.
My brother did get married at the wedding chapel in the Grand Floridian. It was lovely. We stayed at the I think actually we stayed at the Poly, but they stayed at the Grand Floridian. Mm-hmm. The ceremony. I've actually been to 2 weddings there. Mm-hmm. A friend of Laurel's got married last year. Mm-hmm. There's but lovely ceremony. You have the option, I think, of a violin or a piano player. Mm-hmm. Everything is professional, but it goes off with the scheduling accuracy of a state dinner. I mean, there's someone there to tell you where to stand, what to do. You hit your marks. The ceremony itself, everyone's sort of out of the way, and that's when you get to have fun. But the before and after, it's all very professional. It's kind of neat, actually. I would love to hear stories though of brides breaking or grooms freaking out at the last minute and stuff like that. It would be hysterical, but it's a really nice facility, and I really like now that we can stay at the villas, which we'll talk about, because you can walk out the door of the villas in the rain and not get wet. It's that close to the wedding pavilion.
Yeah, and in fact, it's interesting from my conversations with the cast members. It isn't actually the brides or the grooms that freak out. It tends to be the dads who are paying.
Yeah, yeah, it's expensive.
It's just that I remember, talking with this guy who worked at facilitating, and just one dad going off on him because it was like, it was about to rain. And it's like, you have to do something about this. And it's like, it's Florida, sir.
The dome was extra. You didn't rent the dome?
Yeah. And another thing that's kind of an interesting piece of the history, you may remember in 1996, for the, the anniversary of the opening of the resort, they did what is now known as the Candy Castle.
Yeah, the cake.
The cake. And so the 25th anniversary of the opening of Walt Disney World. And if you remember being inside the wedding pavilion, Len, that the way the window is, they sort of have that, not stained window, it's stained, sort of cut glass.
Window, yeah, so it's cut glass. So if you're walking down the aisle,
Yep.
The altar, the wedding altar, is raised and in front of you, but beyond that is a picture window.
Yep.
And in the dead center of the picture window is Cinderella Castle, so that you can get it in all your photos. It's there. It's just, it's the picturesque shot. And obviously the building was built for that particular view in mind. It's not a coincidence. They built the entire thing around it.
All right. So again, so you're a bride and you're having your fairy tale wedding.
And you've dreamed about this since you were a small child. Yes.
Okay. And so here comes October of 1996, and now the stately gray blue Cinderella Castle is now hot pink and is festooned with giant lollipops and gumdrops. And there were a lot of brides who were very upset about their wedding pictures featuring this.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, just sort of like, why didn't we just bring for a couple of Hawaiian shirts? Okay,
Well, the funny thing is, what do they do with that? Because you planned for this your entire life. Clearly, the marketing people in the parks did not talk to the wedding chapel people, right?
This happens all the time with the Walt Disney Company. The hard reality is that for everyone thinks the masterful Disney Company where, everything is planned. And the reality is it's 30 plus small businesses that, have their own agendas and, and don't really communicate all that well. Yeah. So, the wedding people honestly didn't find out till the first brides began complaining. And it's like, what? There's a problem?
Yeah.
And so, they had a number of solutions. One of them was basically to, position a painting or an image just, that sometimes they put it inside the building, sometimes it was outside the building, but gave you your fairy tale view. But they had to compensate a lot of weddings that were held during this 18-month period, whether it was, all right, we'll give you, free flowers, or we'll take some money off of the meal. We're sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted when you booked with us months and months and months ago.
Yeah, a year ago. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's, but what are you going to do? The castle cake, as notorious as it might be among Disney fans, did get people to come down to the park, for the 20. But that eventually went away, and now again, to sort of jump ahead here, this is a resort that, while it's still trying to get a turn of the century feel going, or maintain that turn of the century sense, still has to placate guests of the modern day. So, just recently we saw them add the Alice in Wonderland water themed play.
Yeah, the splash area. It's nice.
Yep. And as you mentioned, in March of 2011, word began to leak about, that there was something being built right next door. In fact, Disney filed the permits for, this huge building that was going to be built to the south of the existing resort, wedged in, just to the north of the wedding pavilion.
This is the DVC building.
Yeah, they had to take out the existing tennis courts and add a parking lot. But and you've stayed there, right, Len? Or
I've stayed. Yeah, I've stayed in the resort itself since the DVC, and I've stayed in the DVC itself. I love the DVC. We stayed in a 1-bedroom last year. Mm-hmm. It's huge, and the Victorian effect isn't overly stuffy. I thought it would be, all sort of gingerbread cutouts and lace and stuff like that. It's actually remarkably modern on the inside, with only a few sort of Victorian touches. But the kitchen's all stainless steel, just like I guess Charles Dickens had back in London. But the funny thing is this. So the rooms are huge, and not as big as Old Key West, but big. The shower, for some reason, it's a walk-in shower. You could probably have a small cocktail party in the shower. It actually, I did a video of this. I put it on Twitter when I was there. It actually has an echo. Like if you stood outside of the shower and you said echo, you could actually hear the echo in the shower. It is that big, and I have no idea why the shower is that big. It is. I don't have a closet that big in my house. Massive, beautiful, beautiful bathroom now.
Wow. Okay. But just to be clear here, we're not talking about a building like the 15-story tall Bay Lake Tower.
No, it's like five stories, I think, 4 or 5
Okay.
stories. It's a C-shaped building. There's a few rooms that look towards the Magic Kingdom. A lot of them look out actually straight towards the Poly, which when I was there was a construction zone, and then everything else sort of on the other side overlooks the grounds or the parking lot.
Okay, and I've got, 147 units, or at least that's the numbers I've got.
That sounds about right, yeah.
And it supposedly opened in October of 2013. Mm-hmm. So, and can you talk a little bit about the Mary Poppins fountain? Yeah,
so inside there's a when you walk into the lobby, there's a fountain, and it's penguins. From Mary Poppins. It's sort of like the centerpiece of the lobby. So when you walk in, to the left is where you would check in, and super helpful, great service there. But straight ahead is the fountain, and you actually have to go past the fountain to get to the elevators. And above the fountain, it's actually open for a couple of stories, so you get this great effect where the fountain is the centerpiece of the middle part of the lobby. It's really nice. Everyone stops to take pictures with the penguins. It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. And I guess the other element that people keep talking about when they stay there is the television inside the mirror.
It's in the bathroom. Yeah, it's got in the bathroom, at least in one bedroom, there's a TV behind the mirror, so you can. I guess this is it's deadly expensive. I think we happened to go during Easter last year, and I think for the one bedroom, we paid it was $1,300 a night. It was our one night. Like, okay, we had to go at this particular time. It was the one time it was available. It was like $1,300, and I guess it's for people who can afford that. They've got their own stock portfolios that they need to keep up with, and so that's why it's like that. It must be.
Wow, and much in that Henry Flagler tradition, where money is no object.
It must not. It's definitely Flagler-esque there, but it's a great. And there's no on-site dining at the DVC. You share everything with the Grand Floridian, but you're halfway between the Poly and the Grand Floridian, really. So you really could walk to either place. Now in the rain, I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But super convenient, great rooms. Again, it's just deadly expensive. That's the one. But I would. I think it's probably my favorite. It's certainly my favorite DVC within the Magic Kingdom area, and probably within the Epcot area. I also like Old Key West, but yeah, really nice.
Well, and just to sort of bring this to a close, what's been nice about the flow is that again, it's one of these things where right from the get-go, it's been a hotel that has tried to establish fun little traditions. For example, do you know about the parasol parade that they do there, where the staff, these poor maids that have to carry wicker baskets and such, would walk through the hotel with parasols and, to start the day. And what ended up happening was that during the construction phase and all that, just between what was going on around the pool and all that, it just was one of these things where it looked like, look, we're a construction site. We need to stop this for now. And, but once construction completed, there was this weird little pause, where people are like, well, do we bring that back? And it's like, well, of course we bring it back, and in fact, they brought it back even bigger, that now it's not just the maids carrying parasols. It's the male wait staff have been handed, black, top hats, and also
really,
yeah, so it's one of these things where, to circle back on what that architect said, I guess I have to agree. It's strange. I do think of obviously the Poly and the Contemporary were there, far earlier, but there's just something about the flow that seems that much more Disney. I mean, I don't know if it's just because the hotel itself is so theatrical, or, that when you go in, you'll typically find somebody at the piano playing, or if you go in at night, there's that band, up, playing in the balcony. It's just, there's something about this hotel that is, just...
It's very relaxing, isn't it?
It is, it
Yeah.
is. And people get very possessive of it. I mean, I think one of my favorite things, you know, in fact, you know, Nancy and I have been talking about, you know, trying to figure out when we could actually go down there to do this. But when they set up the Christmas tree in the lobby.
Oh, yeah, that's famous with the gingerbread house.
Yeah, but there are people who actually deliberately book the night, you know, book to stay in the hotel the night the Christmas tree is going up, just so they can stay up all night and watch this thing being built. Because again, it's quite theatrical to go to bed at night, you know, with there no Christmas tree in the lobby, and then wake up with this giant thing that's appeared overnight.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
a good the gingerbread house is actually it's not but the spoiler alert, it's not all gingerbread. They actually build a wood frame with 2x4s to support the gingerbread.
You know, that's to borrow a joke from The Simpsons, there was that tragic accident involving a load-bearing candy cane. That, you know,
Exactly. The great Wonka fire of Odd 3.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that. But yeah, but it is a little strange. You know, just sort of, you know, it's like, oh, you know, come enjoy it, you know, okay, our wonderful gingerbread siding. So... but yeah, no, it's a wonderfully theatrical hotel, and you know, it's just. But again, you're right. It's just I don't understand why it is so weirdly relaxing to hang out in that giant lobby, but it is.
I remember when it first opened, and we were doing when we first started doing Magic Kingdom research after it opened, we would go in and sit at the lobby lobby, and yeah, I mean, I've napped there I don't know how many times, and nobody says anything about it. About, you know, I fell asleep in there many times. Do you recall the story of the woman with the teddy bears?
Yeah, that's
It's an interesting story. I mean, without saying anything about the woman itself, there's this woman who is she still there? She was there last time I was there. She was.
Yeah, I've seen photographs of her over the past 3 months. So yes, she still returns,
and so she walks around. She hangs out in the lobby of the Grand Floridian with these teddy bears, and she's there every day. She doesn't stay at the resort. She shows up and hangs out with the teddy bears all day in the lobby. And then, I guess, goes home at some point. And to their credit, I mean, management, and she's completely benign. She's, obviously, I think there are issues there, but, management lets her do it. Like, it's like it's not a fixture, but it's, you know, to management's credit, they haven't got a trespassing order against her.
No. And in fact, I think in a weird sort of way, given this theatrical environment, you need characters to fill this theatrical
exactly
environment.
It's a little quirky little piece of trivia for the Grand Floridian. I think it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, so tell you what, Len, let's you and I figure out how we can be the colorful characters in the Polynesian lobby.
We'll be walking around with the drinks from Trader Sam's.
That's right.
And then the volcano erupts. That's my story.
Yeah. So, anyway, folks, that is the second and final half of the story here with the Grand Flow. Though, again, what's interesting is that if you know your Disney history, the success of this hotel, and showing that making a grand statement, you know, you look at the Disneyland hotel that straddles the front of Disneyland Paris, or if you look at or, you know, for that matter, the hotel there at Hong Kong, you know, that these, you know, drew their inspiration directly from the Grand Floridian. So, you know, this style of resort, you know, is marched out across the world, and it'll just be interesting to see if, you know, this Henry Flagler inspired idea, you know, finds its way to Shanghai or whatever Disney's doing in South America in the not so distant future. But you didn't hear that from me.
No idea. Okay.
Yep. And that's it.
Cool. Thanks very much, Jim. That was a great wrap-up to the story. All right. You've been listening to the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. Please go on to iTunes and Stitcher and rate our show and tell us what you would like to hear next. Don't forget, there are walkarounds of the 4 Disney theme parks over on disneydish.bandcamp.com. It's Jim and I walking through all 4 parks, telling stories, talking about what's coming up in the future. A lot of fun, recorded in stereo, so a lot of neat audio effects there.
Stereo.
It was actually pretty cool. So again, disneydish.bandcamp.com. Go give it a listen. For Jim, this is Len. We will see you on the next show.
Take care, guys.